Are you ready to fall asleep to these scary stories? Before you fall asleep, make sure you subscribe to my channel and like this video. And don't forget to tell me in the comments what time you're watching and where you're watching from. Sleep well. It was late August, but the humidity of summer had decided to cling on through the rains of the oncoming autumn. Evenings were filled with gentle drizzle, the world quiet and still as the people of town watched for thunder from the shelter of their back doors. This quiet stillness bode well for the autumn to come and the Halloween to come with it. Nights like these never failed to put me in that Halloween mood, and so I decided to explore town with my camera, capturing any scenes I could find of the eerie and uncanny while the town gently slept. I paused at a huge tree blowing in the gentle night breeze, the orange glow of a streetlight casting dappled shadows onto the grass. I set up my camera and began recording, hoping that no cars would pass by and ruin the audio of the rustling leaves. None did. I was alone in the silence, left to scan the shadows as the recording timer steadily grew to long minutes. As I finished up, I turned to see a silhouette standing nearby, its features unclear in the harsh streetlight. "That camera's awesome, bud. I'd say you could get some great photos with that." He was friendly, but I stayed on guard in case he fancied taking my camera after a sneaky move. "Sure can," I replied. "It does video too. I'm getting some clips of the streets for my channel while it's all quiet and spooky." "You're talking my language now, bud. If spooky is what you want." He paused to wag his finger like he had just made a sale. "I've got a few stories to tell." He introduced himself, telling me he lived in an estate not far from where I used to live myself. He seemed a decent sort. "What brings you out and about on a night like this yourself?" I asked him. "The missus kicked me out. I was going to head down to the 24-hour store to grab something if you fancied the walk." I agreed, and he began to tell me his story along the way. He spoke of the nearby Lover's Lane, a small lane running down behind the petrol station we were making our way toward. "It's all built up now. New lights, new houses, the lot. But you wouldn't believe what happened down there back in the day. Make your blood freeze, it would." He was clearly enjoying drawing out the story for a better build-up. I got the sense he wasn't used to being listened to, so I indulged him. Besides, his enthusiasm for telling the tale was infectious. As it so happened, back in the day was the early 90s, the best time for urban myths to spread, by word of mouth and with little to no internet to spoil them. The lane was just dirt, with that little rusty gate at the end. He waved his hand in a broad stroke in front of him, an artist painting the scene onto his canvas of night air. No tarmac or street light or anything, just a dirt path. People used to sneak down it for a quick smoke or a kiss. Speaking of which, he reached into his hoodie pocket and produced a joint. "Want some?" I politely declined. I made the right decision. He lit it up as we strolled, and the second-hand smoke alone almost floored me. He continued his story after a deep drag of his joint, unbothered by the cloud of smoke wafting from his mouth. "There was this girl. She was seeing a lad who lived round the corner from me. I won't say their names now. I'm superstitious about these things. So she was sneaking around behind the lad's back. She was seen going down Lover's Lane, pretending she was going to the petrol station for some sweets." He paused to nudge me with his elbow. "But she was getting something else, all right." He laughed as if he had spoken comedy gold. I couldn't help but laugh along with him. He took another drag. He nodded with urgency, eager to get the story moving. His expression darkened. "She was seen anyway, and someone ratted her out. Instead of confronting her, the boyfriend decided to wait until she was going on one of her little trips to the shop, and followed her down. Sure enough, that's what happened. He followed her down, hoping to catch her in the act." He paused to hold his hands out a forearm's width apart, and he took a knife this big with him. We arrived at the petrol station, the fluorescent lights and shelter seeming like a cool oasis on such a humid night. Tiny droplets of drizzle were made a misty curtain over the harsh white of the station lights. After talking the attendant into selling him a small bottle of vodka after hours, we took shelter beside the public washing machines next to the station, out of sight so that he could take a drink. So, in the dark, he walks right up to them while they're busy kissing, pulls the knife out on them, and starts shouting his head off. The girlfriend's guy thinks he's about to get stabbed, so he grabs for the knife and things get messy. No lights at the time, remember, so the two are rolling around in the dirt and the dark, punching and struggling in the heat of the moment. Then, silence. The body of the boyfriend is found the next day, with the knife. He paused to make a puncture noise with his mouth while pointing at his chest. Stuck straight into his heart. He paused to take another mouthful of vodka. The girlfriend and her guy must have fled town, because no one ever saw him again. Good thing, too, after the rumors started spreading. Not just about them, but what was seen there in Lover's Lane after they left. He shivered suddenly. "Gives me chills thinking about it," he said, laughing at his own unease. "They say that the boyfriend's ghost haunts the lane, appearing on nights like this to anyone who's ever even thought about cheating on their partners. He appears beside you, as suddenly as he appeared to his girlfriend and her guy, with that big wound still bleeding from his heart, all bloody and pale." His eyes drifted to the lane just over the wall, lost in thought as he imagined the chilling sight only feet from where we stood. "Do you want to walk down it?" I suggested. He shot me an incredulous half grin and sheepishly shook his head. "Nah, no way. Not now." "Ah, go on," I encouraged him. "I have my camera and all. Maybe we could capture the ghost on video and get famous. Think of the stories we could both tell then." He fidgeted for a moment, clearly tempted by the idea. Without a word, he downed the remainder of his vodka and flicked his head towards the lane. "All right, let's go." We rounded the corner and stood at the entrance to the lane. It seemed a mile long now, ending in darkness at the rusted gate that was all that remained of the old lane. I readied my camera, imagining a figure stepping forth from the shadows, knife blade glinting in the flickering streetlight. "Of course the light is broken," he said with a nervous giggle, regretting agreeing to walk down with me. I began recording, and we walked steadily down the lane. The temperature seemed to drop, and the lane was filled with the sound of the gentle rain and our echoing footsteps. Our unease mounted as we neared the dark part at the end. The gate was an old-style kissing gate, the kind that moved back and forth within a barrier so that only one person could go through at a time. My companion rushed through in his eagerness to leave the lane, which meant that if anything should appear behind me, my escape would be blocked in the long seconds it took him to walk through. I felt the hairs on my neck stand as I consciously chose not to look behind me. He pointed to a patch of broken tarmac behind me. "That's where it happened. That's where they found him. They said all the pain and anger in his heart came out in his blood, so nothing ever grew there again. Even when they tarmacked it, that spot never settled properly." I made my own way through the gate. The man looked around him, clearly on edge, with the vodka doing little to steel his nerves. As we walked down the hill into a housing estate, we felt the unease leave us as we left the lane behind. I ceased recording and opted to take one last photo for the road. I lined up my camera and took a test photo to gauge the lighting. As I turned to thank the man for being my ghost hunting partner, I saw him standing agape, eyes wide with fear and stone-cold sober. Without so much as a goodbye, he ran away in a dead sprint, leaving me alone in the silent estate. I forced myself to look back at Lover's Lane and saw only blackness and the light of the lane behind the gate. With the chills on my back never dying down, I walked home, checking over my shoulder the entire time. I looked the man up on social media the next day. To my amusement, he had been tagged in several incendiary posts from who I can only assume was his now ex-girlfriend. Abusive tirades of unpunctuated vitriol covered his timeline, making liberal use of the title two-timing scumbag and other colorful insults. I went over the footage and nothing really stood out. However, the photo I took revealed much more. It had only been a test photo, and so it was somewhat shaky and poorly exposed, all noise and shadows. But I could see well enough why my companion ran so suddenly. Something my eyes hadn't seen, but his had. I did well to walk away when I did. I'm not crazy. I knew that was what they thought, what everyone thought, but they were wrong. I've spent weeks, maybe even months, trying to make them understand. But it doesn't matter because nobody listens. They call it a breakdown or a mental episode. But I saw what happened. I saw the truth, and I know I'm not imagining things. When I first came here, they tried to convince me that I was just seeing things, that maybe I was imagining it all. But I wasn't, and I'm not. Now I'm stuck in this drab room, surrounded by people who truly are lost in their minds. I don't belong here. This morning in group therapy, we sat in a circle. The therapist looked at me with that neutral, unreadable expression, her pen ready. I started talking like I always do, hoping this time someone might listen. It started slowly, I said, my voice shaky from telling the story over and over again. My job consumed me. I worked late, missed dinner with my family. My wife, Elena, would tell me, "You're doing this for us," whenever I'd apologize for missing another important moment. It was during one of those long nights at my desk that things changed. I came home, and the house felt wrong, too quiet. Elena was in the kitchen, standing in the dark. When I flicked on the light, she jumped, startled. Her eyes didn't seem the same, cold, distant. "I'm just tired," she said. But there was something off about her. After that night, everything got stranger. She wasn't herself anymore. Her voice had a strange rhythm to it, and she started pronouncing words wrong. At first, I thought she was teasing me. But it wasn't a joke. She was trying to act like my wife, but something was missing. My kids, too. They stopped talking to me, just sitting on the couch, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. It didn't feel right. I'd ask them about their day, but they'd just smile. Not the smiles I knew. These were stretched, forced, like something was pretending to be happy. One night, I woke up to find them standing in the doorway, just staring. No words, just watching. I asked them what they were doing, but they would just giggle and go back to bed like nothing happened. I tried talking to Elena about it, but she would always say the same thing. "You're just stressed." I even went to the doctor, but everything came back normal. That only made me more frustrated. I knew what I saw, and I knew something was wrong. Eventually, I set up cameras, hoping to catch something, anything, to prove I wasn't imagining it. But every morning, the footage was gone, wiped clean. I confronted Elena, but she just stared at me, like she didn't care, like she wasn't even there. The therapist jotted down notes as I spoke, but I knew she wasn't really listening. I could see it in her eyes. No belief, just cold observation. The last night, I can still remember it clearly. I came home early, hoping to catch them off guard. Elena was in the kitchen, talking to something in the dark. I couldn't see what it was, but I could feel its presence, thick in the air. And then, her skin. It moved, like ripples on water, and her eyes, they weren't hers anymore. The kids came out of the shadows, and their bodies bent the wrong way. Their smiles were too wide, too unnatural. I had to do something. I had to stop them before it was too late. I grabbed a knife. They weren't my family anymore, I told the therapist, my voice shaking. They were something else, something pretending to be them. "And you were saving them?" she asked, her tone indifferent. "I had no choice," I whispered. "I had to protect myself." She didn't say anything, just scribbled more notes. I could feel the other patients staring at me, but I didn't care anymore. They didn't understand. And then, just for a split second, I saw it. The therapist's face shifted, like her skin wasn't attached right. Her eyes flickered with a yellow light, but it was gone just as quickly as it appeared. "You saw it too," I shouted, but no one responded. As I was led out of the room, I glanced back one last time. The therapist's eyes glinted and she smiled, just a little too wide. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. I'm not a superstitious person. I didn't believe in ghosts or demons until now. Yeah, stuff happens that can't be explained, but I just want you all to know that it took more than a couple of flying spoons or a door opening on its own to scare me out of my job. Since the department didn't find any reason to keep this police report confidential, I will now detail you everything I can on what happened on the scariest night of my life. We had just received word from dispatch to check out a noise complaint in a small neighborhood whose name I will not disclose for their privacy. It was me and my partner. Let's call him Paul, and I'll go by Mike. We arrived sometime after midnight. The street is dead. Everyone is sound asleep at this point. We park our patrol car in front of the aforementioned house and exit the vehicle. We knock on the door and let our presence known. "Police, is anyone home?" A little girl, 8, 10 in appearance, opens the door and peeks through the gap. "Hey!" I crouch to make myself less intimidating. "Is your parent or guardian home?" She shakes her head. My first thought was that she probably had the TV a little too high and woke up the neighbors. But before I could tell her to stay inside and lock the doors, then part, I heard the sound of crashing silverware coming from what I presumed would be the kitchen. The entire house was nearly pitch black. The girl answering the door and shaking her head let me know she was alone, which makes whoever made that noise an intruder as far as it concerns me. I ask the girl to step outside and turn to Paul. "Paul, why don't you give her one of those lollipops you like to suck on when you're nervous?" Paul gave me a cold stare as the girl giggled. They went to go wait by the car as I slowly pushed the door all the way open. "Police, if there's anyone in this house, please let yourself be known." Without a warrant, I had no right to enter the building. I tried my best to spot whoever made the noise, but it is too dark to see. Just any sign of a threat and I would be justified to search the house. But nothing. I left the door open and headed back towards Paul and the girl. "Hey again. I don't think we introduced ourselves. I'm Officer Mike. This is my partner, Paul. If I may ask, what is your name?" "Maribel." "That's a pretty name. So, Maribel. Again, if I may ask, where's your family?" As soon as I'd finished my sentence, the television in the living room turned on, volume fully up. Me and Paul quickly turned in surprise and could see the television playing static from outside. We put Maribel in the back seat of the patrol car for her safety, as no civilians were allowed in the front seats. We then, against our better judgment, enter the house. It ripped right through my uniform, causing me to fall forward. I dropped the glass, which broke into smaller chunks. It continued clawing at my shirt and flesh, but stopped when Paul opened fire. I heard its screech fading as Paul helped me up. We both then hurried back outside to find Maribel missing from the back seat. It was difficult explaining what happened to the department without sounding like nut jobs. The police cameras who we were betting on to prove our stories had shut off the moment we entered the house. The thing, whatever it was, must have turned them off while we were unaware. The only part of our story that our police captain took seriously was the girl, Maribel. The captain brought up a missing person report and asked us if this was the girl we saw. It was. It's been just a few days since I gave up the badge to save whatever little pride I could spare. I just ask to whoever hears this and to whomever it may reach. The next time a door opens on its own, or things move by themselves in your home, check the mirrors. Dad was always a bit of an odd guy, odd and strict. I always thought it was because he was a single parent, but even that didn't quite explain his unusual behavior. He had high expectations. Chores needed to be done, rules followed, and if I didn't, there was only one consequence. No, Dad had a different sort of consequence. He introduced the jar when I was 6, and it came with a lot of serious thought. I remember coming home from my first day of kindergarten and finding Dad sitting in the living room. The jar was on the little end table where the magazines usually stood. The jar might have once held pickles. It always smelled faintly of brine. And it was full of beans. Pinto beans, the kind used for crafts. 3 bags, maybe more, filled the jar, and a piece of tape declared it to be my jar. "Take a seat. We need to have a very serious talk," he said. I ended up sitting on the floor, looking up at him. He looked more serious than I'd ever seen, which made me uneasy. Up until that point, Dad had always been a fun, goofy guy who played games with me. But now he looked like a judge about to deliver a sentence. "You're 6 now, old enough to know right from wrong. In this family, we use the bean jar to handle discipline. Do you see this jar?" he asked. I nodded, and he seemed satisfied. "The bean jar represents you. It's everything you are and everything you could be. So, from now on, if you're bad, disrespectful, or break the rules, I won't yell or send you to your room. I'll simply take a bean from the jar." I almost laughed. Was this some kind of joke? How could a jar of beans be scary? Dad was always coming up with silly things like this, telling me stories about monsters in the closet or why I needed to brush my teeth. But his expression told me this was different. He wasn't joking this time. "You're smart," he said, picking up a bean but not taking it out of the jar. He held it over the rest of the beans, and in that moment, it felt like something shifted inside my head. A sudden wave of sadness and anxiety washed over me, and I didn't want him to take the bean out. I needed it back. He must have noticed my reaction because he put it back, and I felt an odd relief. "I'm sorry, but you need to understand what's at stake here. You're my last chance to get this right. The bean jar knows when you fall short, just as it knows when you're doing well. My father used it, and his father before him. The jar is used until your 18th birthday, or until all the beans are gone." I nervously asked him what would happen if all the beans were gone. His face darkened and he replied, "You don't want to know." That's how it started. Dad didn't turn into some kind of villain overnight. He went back to being the same dad he'd always been. We still played video games, built with Legos, and had fun together. But whenever I broke a rule, he would get serious, walk over to the jar, and take a bean. He'd crush it between his fingers, and I'd feel a sense of loss I couldn't quite explain. Even for small mistakes like forgetting to wash the dishes or staying up too late, it was always the same. One bean, crushed. It wasn't the act itself that scared me, but the strange feeling that came with losing a bean. It was like a piece of me was crumbling. I became obsessed with following the rules. Every morning I woke up at 5 a.m. to start my chores, and I made sure my schoolwork was perfect. I couldn't risk losing another bean. By the time I reached high school, I didn't have many friends. Dad was the only one I was really close to, but our relationship was strained. Then I met Cass, and she changed everything. Cass wasn't a top student, but she had potential. We became friends when I helped her with her grades, and eventually I told her about the bean jar. "So, he just takes a bean out and crushes it?" she asked. "Yes," I replied, unsure how to explain. "And then what? You lose a bean?" "When all the beans are gone, something terrible will happen," I said. "Like what? No dessert for a week?" "I don't know, but when he crushes a bean, it's like part of me disappears. I can't explain it, but I hate it." I hadn't meant to cry, but Cass didn't make me feel bad. She just held me, and for the first time, I realized what I had been missing all these years. Someone who understood. Cass and I grew closer, but as I started spending more time with her, Dad became distant. He would hold the bean jar sometimes, as if debating what to do next. I followed the rules, but he seemed frustrated, unable to use the jar. Everything changed one day when Cass and I came home after school. Dad was supposed to be at work, but when we walked in, he was sitting on the couch, staring at the jar. "You've broken the rules," he said coldly. He lined up 4 beans, one for each rule I'd broken, and smashed them one by one. The pain was unbearable. I had never felt anything like it. Cass yelled at him to stop, but he didn't listen. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door. That's when I snapped. "You won't touch her," I said, standing up to him. His face was a mix of shock and anger. He threatened to destroy all the beans, claiming I'd cease to exist if they were gone. But before he could act, he clutched his chest, collapsing to the floor. That was 2 years ago. Since then, I've been living with Cass and her family. I found the house empty, but I discovered something strange in my father's room. 5 jars, each with a different name. They were all empty, the lids missing. And there was a 6th jar, broken. I don't know what really happened, but I took my jar with me. It's in my dorm room now. I'm not sure if it still works, but I'm not taking any chances. When I first heard about the cabin in the woods, I was skeptical. People in our small town loved to tell ghost stories, especially about that part of the forest. A long, narrow road led out there, deep into the heart of Pine Hollow. They said the cabin had been abandoned for decades, maybe longer, and was rumored to be cursed. The stories varied. Some said it was haunted by a woman who had disappeared long ago. Others claimed it was a place where something darker lived, something unnatural. It was autumn when I decided to see it for myself. The leaves were turning, the air growing crisp, and the idea of a weekend spent in the quiet of the woods sounded appealing. The truth was, I didn't believe in the stories, but I was curious. There's a certain allure to the forbidden, to places you're warned to stay away from. I suppose part of me wanted to be proven wrong. I borrowed the keys from an old family friend, Mr. Calloway, who owned a bit of land near the cabin. He raised an eyebrow when I asked. "You know people stay away from that place for a reason," he said. "I'm not afraid of ghost stories, Mr. Calloway." His eyes darkened. "It's not about fear. It's about respect." I shrugged off his warning, took the keys, and left. By the time I reached the edge of Pine Hollow, the sun was beginning to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows over the road. The forest grew denser as I drove, the branches overhead knitting together like a web. I found the turnoff Mr. Calloway had mentioned, a dirt path almost hidden by overgrowth. The tires of my truck crunched over fallen leaves as I turned onto it, the headlights cutting through the encroaching dark. After what felt like an eternity, I arrived at the cabin. It stood in a small clearing, its wooden structure sagging with age. The front porch was tilted, the windows dark, and the roof looked as if it might collapse at any moment. Vines had grown up one side of the cabin, their tendrils creeping over the windows like skeletal fingers. The entire place seemed frozen in time, as though it had been untouched for years. I parked the truck and stepped out, pulling my jacket tighter around me. There was no wind, no sound, just the stillness of the forest pressing in from all sides. I felt uneasy, but I chalked it up to the isolation. The door creaked when I pushed it open, the rusted hinges protesting. Inside, it was just as I expected. Old furniture covered in dust, the faint smell of rot lingering in the air. I found a kerosene lamp on a shelf and lit it, casting a warm glow over the room. There was a fireplace, a small table with 2 chairs, and a couch that looked like it had seen better days. I settled in, starting a fire in the hearth to chase away the cold. As the flames crackled, the cabin felt a bit more welcoming, though the silence still weighed heavily. I unpacked my bag and made myself some dinner. By the time I finished, night had fully fallen, and the darkness outside seemed impenetrable. That's when I first noticed something strange. Sitting on the couch, I could hear it, barely at first. A soft, rhythmic sound. It was so faint that I almost thought I was imagining it, but as I listened closer, it became unmistakable. It was coming from under the floorboards like a tapping. Faint, deliberate. I stood up, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling. The cabin was old, and old buildings made noises, I told myself. It was probably just the wood settling. I tried to ignore it, but as the minutes passed, the tapping grew louder. It wasn't random. It was too even, too measured, like someone or something was beneath the floor, knocking in a steady pattern. I grabbed the lamp and knelt on the floor, placing my ear against the boards. The tapping stopped. The silence returned, and I sat back, heart pounding. Then I heard it again, this time from the walls. I stood up quickly, feeling my pulse race. Something about the sound was all wrong. It was too rhythmic, too calculated. It seemed to be following me, moving along the walls of the cabin. I backed away from the noise, but no matter where I stood, it seemed to circle me, growing louder, as though whatever was making it was getting closer. Suddenly, it stopped. I stood in the center of the room, holding my breath, listening to the crackle of the fire and the beat of my own heart. Everything had gone still again, and for a moment, I felt a sense of relief, thinking maybe it had been nothing more than the creaks of the old cabin after all. But then, there was a soft creak from behind me. I turned slowly toward the door. It was slightly ajar, though I was sure I had closed it when I came in. Beyond the threshold was only darkness, the forest shrouded in shadow. I stepped forward, hesitant, and peered outside. The night was quiet, the trees standing like sentinels under the moonless sky. I couldn't see anything, but I had the distinct feeling I was being watched. I quickly shut the door and bolted it, trying to calm the rising fear in my chest. I wasn't sure what I had heard, but it didn't matter. I convinced myself it was just the nerves that came with being alone in an unfamiliar place. I sat back down, trying to ignore the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Hours passed, and I must have fallen asleep at some point, because I awoke to the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. They were coming from the other side of the room. I shot up, the lamp flickering on the table. The fire had died down, casting long shadows across the floor. I listened, barely breathing, as the footsteps continued, moving closer. But no one was there. The cabin was empty. The footsteps stopped right in front of me. I stood up, my hands trembling, and backed away toward the door. The air felt heavy, oppressive, and I could feel eyes on me, though I couldn't see anyone. I grabbed the lamp and pulled open the door, running out into the cold night air. My heart was racing, every instinct screaming at me to leave, to get away from that place. But as I stood in the clearing, staring back at the cabin, I realized something that sent a chill down my spine. The windows. They had been dark when I arrived, but now, faintly, I could see light flickering inside. Not from the lamp, and not from the fire. It was something else, something dim, like a glow coming from deep within the walls themselves. I didn't wait to find out more. I ran to my truck, started the engine, and sped down the dirt road, not looking back. The next morning, I went to Mr. Calloway's house to return the keys. I didn't say much about what had happened. I didn't need to. He saw it in my face. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I nodded, unable to speak. He sighed, shaking his head. "You're lucky. The others never made it out." "The others?" "There's a reason people don't go to that cabin," he said. "Once you step inside, it knows you, follows you. The cabin doesn't let go easily." I didn't ask him to explain. I didn't want to know. All I knew was that I wouldn't be going back to Pine Hollow. And to this day, I still wake up in the middle of the night, listening for the sound of footsteps, tapping from beneath the floorboards. Just waiting. I'm not a superstitious person. I didn't believe in ghosts or demons until now. Yeah, stuff happens that can't be explained. But I just want you all to know that it took more than a couple of flying spoons or a door opening on its own to scare me out of my job. Since the department didn't find any reason to keep this police report confidential, I will now detail you everything I can on what happened on the scariest night of my life. We had just received word from dispatch to check out a noise complaint in a small neighborhood whose name I will not disclose for their privacy. It was me and my partner. Let's call him Paul, and I'll go by Mike. We arrived sometime after midnight. The street is dead. Everyone is sound asleep at this point. We park our patrol car in front of the aforementioned house and exit the vehicle. We knock on the door and let our presence known. "Police, is anyone home?" A little girl, 8, 10 in appearance, opens the door and peeks through the gap. "Hey!" I crouch to make myself less intimidating. "Is your parent or guardian home?" She shakes her head. My first thought was that she probably had the TV a little too high and woke up the neighbors. But before I could tell her to stay inside and lock the doors, then part, I heard the sound of crashing silverware coming from what I presumed would be the kitchen. The entire house was nearly pitch black. The girl answering the door and shaking her head let me know she was alone, which makes whoever made that noise an intruder as far as it concerns me. I ask the girl to step outside and turn to Paul. "Paul, why don't you give her one of those lollipops you like to suck on when you're nervous?" Paul gave me a cold stare as the girl giggled. They went to go wait by the car as I slowly pushed the door all the way open. "Police, if there's anyone in this house, please let yourself be known." Without a warrant, I had no right to enter the building. I tried my best to spot whoever made the noise, but it is too dark to see. Just any sign of a threat and I would be justified to search the house. But nothing. I left the door open and headed back towards Paul and the girl. "Hey again. I don't think we introduced ourselves. I'm Officer Mike. This is my partner Paul. If I may ask, what is your name?" "Maribel." "That's a pretty name. So, Maribel. Again, if I may ask, where's your family?" As soon as I'd finished my sentence, the television in the living room turned on, volume fully up. Me and Paul quickly turned in surprise and could see the television playing static from outside. We put Maribel in the back seat of the patrol car for her safety, as no civilians were allowed in the front seats. We then, against our better judgment, enter the house. It ripped right through my uniform, causing me to fall forward. I dropped the glass, which broke into smaller chunks. It continued clawing at my shirt and flesh, but stopped when Paul opened fire. I heard its screech fading as Paul helped me up. We both then hurried back outside to find Maribel missing from the back seat. It was difficult explaining what happened to the department without sounding like nut jobs. The police cameras who we were betting on to prove our stories had shut off the moment we entered the house. The thing, whatever it was, must have turned them off while we were unaware. The only part of our story that our police captain took seriously was the girl, Maribel. The captain brought up a missing person report and asked us if this was the girl we saw. It was. It's been just a few days since I gave up the badge to save whatever little pride I could spare. I just ask to whoever hears this and to whomever it may reach. The next time a door opens on its own, or things move by themselves in your home, check the mirrors. I opened my eyes. It was silent. There was no light. I was lying on my back, staring up. My mind was blank and I felt weak. After some time, I managed to lift myself up, feeling the cold, damp ground beneath my bare feet. I wandered in complete darkness, my hands brushing against cold, humid stone walls on either side of me. I realized I was in a maze. I couldn't tell how long I spent turning corners, lost in this labyrinth, before I found myself in a long, straight tunnel. Ahead of me there was a faint light. With all my strength I climbed the slope toward it. Finally I reached a large iron gate, and beyond it, a world was waiting for me. I had no memory of who I was or why I was there. Pushing open the heavy gate, I found myself in the middle of a forest. I was dressed in nothing but a simple white dress. The scent of flowers, the songs of birds, and the vibrant colors of nature calmed me. But soon, hunger, thirst, and exhaustion returned. I couldn't recall how long I walked before I reached a river. I drank from it greedily and even bathed, washing away the dirt and fatigue. I continued my journey along the riverbank, picking fruits from trees to satisfy my hunger. My only hope was to find some sign of civilization by following the water. As the sun began to set, I arrived at a small village, still barefoot. The village had less than 20 houses, and the farmlands around it were dry with no livestock in sight. The quiet was unsettling, but I was relieved to see lights on in some of the homes. I knocked on the nearest door. Knock, knock. No answer. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I called out. Silence. I tried every house with lights on, but it was the same. No one responded. Something felt very wrong. Out of curiosity and growing concern, I peeked inside a few windows. To my surprise, the homes were empty despite the lights being on. I was alone in the village. One of the lit houses had its door unlocked, so I entered. Inside, everything seemed old and worn out, from the furniture to the kitchenware. The light above the dining table flickered softly, and a half-full jug of water sat nearby. Whoever lived here had left recently. I searched the kitchen for food, but there was nothing. In the living room, a poster on the wall caught my attention. A faceless man in a military uniform. I turned on the black and white television, the most modern thing in the house, hoping to learn where I was. The TV showed images, but no sound. Tuning through the channels, the only broadcast was that same faceless man, giving a speech on a stage as men and women in identical uniforms applauded him. There were no phones, no newspapers. In the bedrooms, I found unisex white dresses identical to the one I was wearing, and some sandals in various sizes. I took a pair that fit me and continued exploring. No photos of a family, just the eerie absence of life. Judging by the size of the dresses, I guessed a small family had lived here. As the night deepened, I chose the main bedroom to sleep in. Outside, the stars shone brightly in the clear sky. I lay there with a head full of questions. Where had the villagers gone? Why had they left their lights on? Who was the faceless man, and why did everyone seem to follow him? Despite the confusion swirling in my mind, exhaustion overtook me, and I fell into a deep sleep. The next morning I set out early, determined to find answers. I resumed following the river, eating what I could along the way. After walking for hours, I spotted a military camp on a small hill in the distance. I knew it was dangerous, but my curiosity got the better of me. I quietly climbed the hill until I reached the camp's fence. Hiding in the bushes, I observed. The camp was built around an abandoned school with military tents set up beside it. On the large playground, I saw a scene that made my stomach churn. Soldiers were tormenting people dressed in the same white clothing as me. They were being tortured, physically and emotionally, and the soldiers seemed to find twisted pleasure in it. The cries of the victims echoed in the air, drowned only by the laughter of the soldiers. I was horrified, asking myself how people could be capable of such cruelty. Suddenly, a hand tapped my shoulder. I nearly screamed but managed to stifle it. I turned around to see a man in a green tunic, bearded and carrying a hammer on his back. "Girl, it's not safe here. Come with me quietly," he whispered. I followed him down a hidden path, through the dense forest. We reached a strange rock formation where he moved a large stone, revealing a narrow passage. "After you," he said. I crawled into the passage and he followed, rolling the stone back into place. It was pitch dark as we made our way through the damp, slippery tunnel. After what felt like forever, we emerged into a vast underground cave. The cave was breathtaking. Stalactites hung from the ceiling, and a green river flowed through the center. Soft daylight filtered through cracks in the cave ceiling, reflecting off the water in mesmerizing patterns. Tents were scattered around the cave, and people dressed in green went about their lives, cooking, washing, children playing. At least 100 people lived here. The man led me to the central tent, where a group of people welcomed me. A middle-aged woman, who seemed to be their leader, invited me to sit and offered me food. "Welcome," she said warmly. After I explained my situation, she and the others shared their story. "We are on an archipelago of 8 islands, once peaceful and self-sufficient. 5 years ago, we were invaded by a neighboring military dictatorship. The dictator enslaved us, taking our resources and forcing us to serve them," the leader explained. "They took everything," added an older man. "Businesses, homes, even our clothing. Now we live in these white dresses with nothing to call our own." A young woman spoke up, her voice filled with anger. "They treat us like objects. We are their slaves, and anyone who resists is brutally punished. We wear green here to blend in with the forest, but outside, everyone is forced to wear white." The man who had brought me here added, "They've also started spraying chemicals to cause amnesia, erasing our memories to control us further. That's likely why you can't remember anything." Suddenly, a gunshot echoed through the cave, piercing the air. Lately, I've been struggling with bouts of insomnia, and last night's full moon certainly didn't help matters. It felt like no matter what I did, sleep was just out of reach. After what seemed like hours of tossing and turning, I finally managed to settle into a comfortable position. I was determined not to move, convinced that if I stayed perfectly still, I'd eventually drift off. I wrapped myself tightly in my winter duvet, lying on my right side with my back turned to the window. That's when I realized I hadn't fully closed the curtains, and the moonlight was streaming in, illuminating the wall in front of me. For a moment, I considered getting up to fix it, but exhaustion won out. I sighed to myself, resigned. I just needed to sleep. That's when I noticed it. A shadow on the wall, faint at first, but unmistakable. It looked like the silhouette of a hand, or more accurately, a claw. Its fingers were crooked and gnarled, twisting unnaturally. The sight of it sent a jolt of fear through me, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The shadow was distorted but eerily clear. 5 long fingers, a narrow wrist. Every instinct in me screamed that something was terribly wrong. Some deep, primal part of my brain knew this was no ordinary shadow. All I had to do was turn my head, just a quick glance over my shoulder, and I'd know exactly what was casting that shape. But in that moment, there was nothing I wanted to do less. I couldn't bear the thought of looking. I stayed perfectly still, every muscle tense. Something told me that any movement, any shift in my position would provoke whatever was there. The shadow swayed gently, as though it were alive, and I held my breath, convinced that if I made even the slightest noise, it would reach out and grab me. Just as my mind was racing with fear, I noticed my cat. He had been curled up at the foot of the bed, peacefully asleep, but now he was sitting bolt upright. His amber eyes were wide and unblinking, staring intently at the wall just above where I lay. His sudden stillness unnerved me even more, confirming that something was wrong. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping that if I couldn't see it, maybe it would go away. When I woke the next morning, the relief was overwhelming. Sunlight streamed into the room, and the terror from the night before felt distant, almost absurd in the bright light of day. Still, I found myself in the exact same position I had fallen asleep in, every muscle stiff from the tension of staying so still for so long. I cautiously sat up and glanced around. The wall was empty, bathed in soft morning light. No sign of the claw-like shadow. Emboldened by the safety of daylight, I turned around to finally confront whatever had terrified me so much. To my surprise, on the cabinet above my bed I saw a set of clothes hangers. Their odd shapes and sizes, combined with the moonlight, had cast the eerie illusion. I laughed at myself as I took them down, feeling foolish but relieved. I had been cleaning out my closet the day before, and must have left them there without a second thought. Later that day, I recounted the story to some of my coworkers. They had a good laugh at my expense, teasing me for being scared of a few hangers. It felt good to talk about it, though, to turn what had been a night of terror into something lighthearted. I even started to feel a little silly for how frightened I had been, but deep down, I knew that fear had felt all too real in the moment. That night, sleep came more easily. I was exhausted from the previous night's ordeal, and the rational part of me knew that there was nothing to fear. But even so, that primal fear still lingered in the back of my mind. I had read somewhere that this kind of instinct is our subconscious warning us, sensing things we're not fully aware of. As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't quite shake that feeling. Still, I was tired enough that I soon found a comfortable position and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Hours later, I woke up in the middle of the night, the room still cloaked in darkness. I groggily reached for my phone, curious to see how much time I had before my alarm went off. As I shifted in bed, my heart suddenly froze. It was still there, clear as day, even in the darkness. The same twisted shadow, its crooked fingers splayed out on the wall, reaching for me once again. He pulls his cab to a stop at the curb, the engine humming quietly as he glances at the rearview mirror. The woman in the back seat has fallen asleep, her head leaning gently against the window, her breathing steady. She had given him an address, one he recognized, but now as they sit there, her peaceful slumber leaves him uncertain of what to do next. He doesn't want to wake her right away. Maybe she just needs a few more minutes. For a while, he waits, the silence of the car heavy around him. Eventually, he turns in his seat, softly calling out to her, "Miss?" There's no response. He tries again, louder this time, but the woman remains still. A knot of worry begins to form in his stomach. He steps out of the car, the cool air biting at his skin as he walks around to the back door. Gently, he taps on the window, hoping the sound will stir her. Still nothing. His heart rate picks up as he opens the door and leans inside. "Miss?" His voice shakes a little now. She doesn't move. He reaches out, his hand hovering above her shoulder, unsure if he should touch her. The stillness feels wrong. Something inside him clenches, dread crawling up his spine. He touches her arm, lightly at first, and feels the coldness. It's a deep, unnatural cold, one that immediately sends panic flooding through him. He jerks his hand back as though burned. She's not just asleep, she's gone, completely, unmistakably gone. He stumbles backward, breath coming in ragged gasps as he stares at her. His mind races. His first instinct is to call the police. That's the right thing to do, isn't it? But a dark, creeping fear whispers in the back of his mind. They won't believe you. He's a cab driver, a nobody. What is he supposed to say? That the woman got in, alive, and then somehow died while he was driving? Who's going to buy that? The thought of trying to explain it, of being interrogated under harsh lights, makes his hands shake uncontrollably. They'll think he did something. They'll lock him up. And even if they don't, who would believe him? His pulse thunders in his ears. No one's going to believe you. He imagines the headlines, the gossip, the judgment. It feels inevitable. Before he realizes what he's doing, he's already back in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel tightly. His knuckles are white, his thoughts a chaotic swirl of fear and guilt. He turns the key in the ignition, and the engine growls to life. He drives. He's barely paying attention to where he's going, his mind clouded with panic. His hands are trembling so much that he struggles to keep the car straight. At a red light, another cab driver pulls up beside him, shouting something about how he's swerving all over the place. The words barely register, but when the man sees his tear-streaked face, the anger fades. Instead of cursing him out, the driver softens. "Hey man, it's okay," he says gently. "It's no big deal, all right? We all have rough nights." The kindness in his voice breaks something in him, and the tears come harder now. He can't explain why. He can't explain any of it. But he keeps driving, trying to escape from the weight of the situation. The world outside is a blur. He doesn't even notice the exact moment the city gives way to the quieter outskirts. The streets become emptier, and soon he's on an open road, speeding toward the hills. The thought forms in his mind before he can stop it. An accident could make this all go away. One wrong turn, one slip of the wheel, and it would be over. No questions, no explanations, no guilt. But the thought terrifies him even more. He doesn't have the courage for that, not yet. He pulls into the parking lot of a supermarket. The lot is deserted, the fluorescent lights flickering above him. He's not entirely sure why he stopped, but in his panicked state, he decides he needs something to dig. If he can't call the police, maybe he can... He doesn't even finish the thought. He just knows he needs to get rid of the body. He shuts off the car, and before stepping out, he glances back at the woman. "Don't go anywhere," he mutters, the absurdity of his words striking him almost immediately. She's not going anywhere. He feels like a fool. Inside the store, he moves through the aisles in a daze, grabbing the first shovel he sees. It's red, oddly bright and cheerful in his hands, a stark contrast to the darkness in his mind. He pays without a word, avoiding the cashier's gaze, and heads back to his car. It's night by the time he reaches the hills. There are eucalyptus and lemon trees, their branches swaying gently in the wind. The lemon trees have thorns, and they scrape against his skin as he walks, but he barely feels it. The pain hasn't sunk in yet. His body is running on autopilot, disconnected from the horror of what he's doing. He digs. The ground is hard, and it takes longer than he expected. His hands blister, his arms ache, but still he digs. The hole is shallow, barely enough. But it will have to do. He goes back to the car to retrieve the woman, but when he opens the door and sees her again, something inside him recoils. He can't do it. He can't bring himself to touch her. Instead, he slides into the back seat next to her, sitting there in the quiet. He glances at her from the corner of his eye, but can't bring himself to meet her gaze. The lifeless, empty stare makes his skin crawl. In his mind, he pictures her spirit, her ghost, perhaps, hovering above him, her eyes hollow, accusing, like a child refusing to close her eyes even as she falls into darkness. With trembling hands, he reaches out, avoiding her face as much as he can, and gently closes her eyes. Her skin is ice cold, like the surface of a frozen lake. A shiver runs through him. Exhausted, emotionally drained, he slumps against the seat. At some point, sleep overtakes him. He dreams of an ice rink, the kind he's seen in movies, but the ice is black and he has no skates. He doesn't even know how to skate, and yet there he is, slipping and stumbling, the cold seeping into his bones. It feels endless. The sharp rays of the morning sun jolt him awake. He sits up, disoriented, the car now filled with daylight. He turns to the seat next to him and finds it empty. The woman is gone. He's alone.